Hey, everybody. It's good to see you. We're doing Bible class a little bit different this week. Jason's not with me, but he'll be back with me next week. This week, we're going to do something a little different. My buddy Ben's with me. Ben, could you give everybody knows who you are at Plaza, but could you just give everybody a quick synopsis of what you do and what you're about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So it's a real pleasure to know Jonathan and call my brother in Christ. We've had a lot of great Bible discussions together, over meals, and just it's been great. But I work at McLeod as a cardiothoracic surgery PA. So I'm very active on the surgical team, and certainly the coronavirus has affected our team a little bit in that we just don't have as many cases. Even though it's affected us, I'm, no expert on the coronavirus, but I've certainly been keeping up a lot on it and reading a bunch of literature on it. But yeah, that's kind of a little synopsis of who I am, what I'm about, and it's great to be here, Jonathan.
So I want to ask you, because other than Danny Ford, you're the closest thing to a doctor I've got, even though I know you're a PA, but I was wondering, I haven't got a real good feel. So there are certain people that take this coronavirus thing super serious and are stockpiling everything like the toilet paper I need right now. And then there are other people that don't think it's even a real deal and believe it's this hoax or conspiracy. And I was wondering, from your standpoint, how serious should I be taking this thing?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. That's, a lot of people are wondering that, as it's the one thing that kind of pervades the news right now. But, I'm going to say, we need to flatten the curve. Okay. I'm going to tell you in a little bit what I mean by that. After I discuss kind of how serious it is. I'll use a comparison here with the flu, which, we run into that every season. We all kind of know about the flu, I'm going to share a graphic here on the screen that kind of compares flu rates with, or flu death rates with COVID-19 death rates. Can you see that graphic okay, Jonathan?
You see it great.
Okay, perfect. So, essentially, the mortality rate with the influenza is about 0.1%. So across the board, across all age brackets, if you take the average, it's about 0.1% of mortality rate. And every year, between 12,000 and about 60,000 die from the flu, and that's been since 2010. So that kind of gives you a ballpark for what we're used to and some numbers that that we can relate to. The coronavirus global death rate is an average of about 4.7%. So that number is a lot higher than the flu. But nobody panic. It's a lot lower than that in the U.S. It's about 1.8%. You can see here that there's a significant difference, across the age brackets. Essentially anybody, over 60, 70, has a little bit increased risk compared to the rest of the general population. And Dr. Fauci, one of the nation's leading experts on infectious diseases, and the coronavirus task force just mentioned that, this pandemic could escalate to be, quite a bit worse than the average flu season, based on the latest models that we've seen, here recently. Between 100,000 and 200,000 people could lose their lives, from this pandemic here in the U.S. And so definitely a little bit worse than the average flu season, but nowhere near as bad as the Spanish flu in 1918. So that's the silver lining there.
So to me, it sounds like it's a thing we totally need to take seriously. We just got a notification about the coronavirus. Um,
Case in point.
yeah, case in point. It's a thing that we need to take seriously, but probably isn't as serious as the things we've seen in the past in history. So take it serious.
Absolutely.
What
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely, we need to flatten the curve. I'm going to tell you what that means here in a second, so stay tuned. But, what can we do about it? We all want to know what to do about it, so we can kind of be responsible and kind of minimize our own risk. And to answer that question, I want to give everybody a little bit of a background. You kind of have to understand how it's spread. Really it's spread through three simple methods, through aerosols, through droplets, and through contact. Aerosols, that's if I were to sneeze, the aerosol is the really super, super fine particles that can stay suspended in the air for a long time. And the droplets are the larger ones that would go 3, 4, 5 feet, and land on something. And then, the contact method that it can spread is if, those droplets land on something and someone else touches that surface. Or I touch my face and touch a surface and somebody else touches that same surface and contracts it that way. So those are the three ways it can be spread. Aerosols in COVID-19 can remain in the air for up to 3 hours. So that's something a lot of people are kind of unaware of, that, it can stay, if someone sneezes and coughs, it can stay in the air for quite a while after that person has even been there. Then on surfaces, it can last from a matter of hours to a matter of days, depending on whether it's inside or outside, or whether, or what that surface is made up of. And so it's important, to take those precautions, desanitizing and, avoid public places, this whole social distancing thing, there's something to it. The second question I think that would help us understand, this whole question of what to do about it is, how contagious is it? And you can look at, if with the flu, if I have the flu, I would infect on average about 1.4 people. And if I gave it to Jonathan, if I gave it to you, you'd infect 1.4 people. And if you take that out 10 people, if 10 people kind of pass it on to each other, a total of about 14 people would have gotten it. But with the coronavirus, that number that represents how contagious it is called the basic reproduction number, or R naught, is a little bit higher. It ranges between 2 and 3. And so if you take the average of 2.5, and you take that, I pass it on, you pass it on, 10 people down the line, instead of 14 people total getting it, like you would with the flu, with coronavirus, it would be closer to 10,000 people getting it. So there's a significantly greater rate of contagion or contagiousness, with the coronavirus compared to the flu. So what do you do about it? We all want to know, what do you do about it? You want to flatten the curve. When in pandemics, you can graph the cases by time to show how fast it's growing. And a very steep curve shows it's growing very fast. And if it grows very fast, you can essentially graph how fast it's growing against the maximum capacity of the local healthcare system. And the goal is to keep that curve under that threshold of the maximum capacity. The way to do that is to flatten the curve, and you do that by slowing down the spread. One of the biggest things that a population can do to flatten that curve, to slow down the spread, is social distancing. And so we hear, all these things on the news, on the radio, on, everywhere, about social distancing. It's this buzzword that everybody's going to grow to hate, if you haven't already grown to hate it. But it works. And we can see that from the Spanish flu in 1918, where there are two cities that were kind of good examples of how social distancing succeeded and failed. Philadelphia, I'm actually going to, I've got another graphic here. I think I can zoom up. Philadelphia had one of the highest rates of fatality in the Spanish flu in 1918. And we can see where they implemented the social distancing. It was when they were fairly high, where they already had a fairly high rate of spread. You can see there was this huge spike that went way above what the local hospitals were able to handle. St. Louis, on the other hand, had the lowest number of deaths per capita. And the difference, this is really interesting, the difference is they implemented social distancing very early on. When they first started noticing cases popping up, they implemented right away. And you can see how drastically different their curve was. You can see they relaxed the social distancing right about here, and they had another spike, further illustrating just how powerfully that that one maneuver really affected the spread and the growth of it. So we need to flatten the curve. Stay home, practice this concept, and it really will help. Another little thing, so just real quick, that we can do to flatten the curve is like people are saying, wash your hands, use hand sanitizer, cover your mouth when you sneeze and cough, with your elbow, and take care of yourself too. Now's the time to stay strong. Just think, in the event that you are exposed, you can, things you can do there is exercise. I know gyms are closed right now. I'm kind of a gym junkie myself, but pull up a YouTube video and work out. Use that as a motivation. Do 20 minutes 5 times a week. Rest well, 8 hours of sleep a night, and the other thing is diet too. Just eating lots of fresh vegetables and fruits, and those are kind of those are not the fun foods usually, but they're the very nutritious foods and the immune boosting, immune supporting foods. And even minimizing sugar and processed foods can do tremendous amounts to help you stay strong and healthy.
So I'm looking at the chart, and it's scaring me a little bit because they went lax on it about 10 weeks in, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It went down, and it was they thought they beat it, I guess, and then it goes back up again, and it took them down past 17 weeks before they started to really nip it in the butt. Mm-hmm. And I've been at the house for about 2, and it's driving me up the wall. So we are at the beginning of that chart right here, over here, right now. And it's about to get, we really haven't seen the beginning of that incline yet. I see here at, what is that, week 5 or 6. So I don't know how long I'm about to be locked in the house, but I understand the seriousness of what's going on. So.
Yes. Yeah. And there's a difference in contagion rates between, the Spanish flu of 1918 and COVID-19 that we're dealing with now. So, we may be kind of in this for the long haul, or it may resolve a lot faster. Hopefully it's going to resolve, a lot faster. There's, I think the point is, we don't set the timeline. The virus sets the timeline, and all we can do is do our best to flatten that curve, with the social distancing, the hand washing, and all that fun stuff. And, and I think, another thing is, to not forget the most important thing in this whole scenario, which is, to not let our faith get weak, but to have our eyes solidly locked on Jesus, the great physician, the author and perfecter of our faith, to do our part, but to leave the rest that we can't control, in Jesus' hands. do our best, but leave God the rest.
That's right. And that's what we can do. I get so worked up and I get anxious as if I could control anything other than washing my hands. But, and there are things that I control, but in a lot of ways, that's all I can do is have faith and trust. And I need to be confident and comfortable in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, all right. So pop us back up. Are we through the science portion?
Yes, let's get to the meat.
Awesome. So go ahead and end this slide and pull us both back up real quick.
Yes.
So I don't know if you've seen it, but I've seen a lot of people that are prepping. The other day I was reading through some articles on, I don't know if it was CNN or who that it was, but these people have been prepping. And in the state of Ohio, there is a group of like 4 or 5 families. There's 30 people total, and they share a couple hundred acres worth of farmland. And they have been made fun of for years because they've stockpiled food and water. And right now,
toilet paper.
It's their time to shine. And they have 2 years worth of canned goods and toilet paper ready to roll so that they are prepared for this moment. And it's kind of like, in your face. They are. Have you ever known a prepper? Personally?
I think I've run into plenty in Walmart, the past month.
Maybe other than that, I don't know if I know any personally. I know I've met one. The best preppers, you will never know who they are, right? So anyways, they are prepping to the max. And that's what everybody's doing. I think a lot of us, for me, I put off prepping of any sort. I didn't have any extra rice in my pantry. I had to go buy all of that stuff last minute. And I think for a lot of us, spiritually, there's a prepping that needs to be done. That we put off in the exact same way that we put off toilet paper. But the payoff, the thing that's at risk there is so much greater than having food for the next few months, or even life or death. Like this thing that's at risk is way bigger. And I'm happy you brought up this message, this passage in particular. Let's open up to the book of Matthew, chapter 25. Matthew chapter 25. Matthew 25, starting in verse 1. Christ is bringing up the ultimate prepper situation. Like this is the ultimate. This is the prepper passage in the Bible.
Yeah, there you go.
and he's telling us this is what you really need to be prepping for, okay? And would you go ahead and read that, verses 1 through 13? Let's all read it together.
Sure. All right, Matthew 25. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, "Here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise answered, saying, "Since there will not be enough for us and for you, go rather to the dealers and buy for yourselves." And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came. And those who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. Afterward, the other virgins came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he answered, "Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour."
It's awesome. So there is an ultimate thing that we're prepping for, and it's eternal life on the other side. I was wondering if you could give everybody a little background on this wedding feast that's going on. Why exactly does he compare? What he's comparing here is his second coming. So Christ Christ is coming back to judge the earth again, and he describes it as this wedding feast, like a husband going and being with his bride and coming back with the wedding party, and the wedding party being waiting there at his house. Can you give everybody a little background about this ancient wedding festival, feast, wedding? What would it have looked like?
Yes, I think this passage was, quite relevant to myself since I just got married, which was fantastic.
Yes.
And there were some similarities, and a lot of differences, but some similarities were, there were groomsmen and bridesmaids, and back in the Jewish in the Jewish tradition, from my reading, my understanding is the groom would start at his house with his party, and would then travel to the bride's house, usually in the evening, and there would be more, kind of an evening, nighttime wedding ceremony, after which the entire group, the entire wedding party, would then go back to the groom's house, and they would have a celebration banquet. One thing that I found curious when I first started looking into this was, like, why on earth, like, why midnight? It's like, wouldn't they just cancel the wedding? Like, the groom didn't show up till midnight. Just, who has a wedding at midnight? The funny thing is, I actually did have a brother who had a wedding at midnight.
He told me about it.
Yes. Yeah. So, they were married in Alaska in the summertime, and, they wanted to do something unique. Up there, it's still bright at midnight in July. And it was very unique, but, normal people, normally you don't have a wedding at midnight. But, if there was a little bit of a delay, if he was heading there for an evening wedding, yeah, a little delay would place him at midnight. So just kind of understanding the historical background, I thought was insightful.
So one of the things that I thought was interesting about this passage is when Luke records it. I believe it's in chapter 12. Mm-hmm. Luke records similar story. Interestingly, he takes these parables. So the one that comes before this one, the faithful and evil servant, that parable, Luke, when he accounts it, he flip-flops the story of the wise and foolish virgins, and he flip-flops them with the faithful and evil servant, which is cool. I don't know why he recorded it the way he saw, the Spirit inspired him to record it in the way that he did. But when Jesus talks about it, the story in that passage, he doesn't talk about it as a wedding feast, if I'm not mistaken. He talks about it as servants waiting for their master to arrive. So, which to me makes more sense. But if Jesus is preaching multiple times, he's using the same sermon illustrations over and over and over again. And, well, I'm a preacher. It's what we do. And he told the story different ways for different purposes at different times, and Luke records it in a different place in his book. But I think it's interesting. These are, why don't you go over, we'll look over at Luke real quick. Luke chapter, I think it's 12.
Yeah.
Look over there real quick.
Luke chapter 12. Yeah, start in verse 35. Let your waist be girded and your lamps burning. You yourselves be like men and who wait for their master when he will return from the wedding, that when he comes and knocks, they may be open to him immediately. Blessed are those servants whom the master, when he comes, will find watching. So in this passage, he did go to his wedding. It is the wedding account. But when he comes back, he has masters or his servants waiting on him, not the wedding party. And either way, the application is still the same, right? It's, I want you to be waiting. You know that country song, Every Light in the House is On? You know what I'm talking about? Tell me that song, so.
Ben.
Yeah, I couldn't sing it for you.
I'm not singing it either.
Oh, come on.
But, every light in the house is on. We're waiting on you for you to arrive. And in that passage, in the Matthew 25 passage, he's like, I want the lights to be left on. Leave the lights on for me, you know. Every light in the house is on. We're excited for you to come. We want you to be here. Then when he gets back, he finds somebody's asleep.
I think Jesus is telling us we need to be Boy Scouts, right? What's the Boy Scout motto? Be prepared, right?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't a Boy Scout, but it probably sounds right.
Neither was I. But I've known a couple Boy Scouts, actually a couple Eagle Scouts, and actually my grandfather was a Troop Scout master, or Troop Master, I think that's what they call him, and he passed away last year when I went up for the funeral. I've never been in the same room with so many Eagle Scouts. I mean, like 20 Eagle Scouts. I mean, like the pinnacle of the Boy Scouts. I mean, like they've gone through all the ranks, right?
Yeah.
And he helped, personally, kind of mentor all these Eagle Scouts. But it just made me think, when I was, I'd hang out with my grandfather. He was always teaching me how to use a compass and, like all these things to survive. And that was because he wanted, his loved ones to be prepared. And I think similarly, Jesus is teaching us on multiple accounts here. We need to be prepared.
In the Luke account, Luke chapter 12, he starts off the passage by saying, have your light lit, and also to gird your loins. Have you ever heard that? Gird your loins. Do you know what that is? So you probably
gird up your robe or the inner garments.
Yeah. So they take that robe, they wrap it around it, and the way I've heard it described, it almost looks like a diaper. The way they tuck it into the front, so that they don't trip on it. They can run full speed. He's like, I want you to be dressed, and I want your light on, and I want you to be prepared. I want you to be looking. But so here's my question for you. Do you think ever as Christians, we slip up in not being prepared? And
Absolutely.
What does that look like? What do you think that looks like?
Absolutely. I would have a word for that. I think complacency would be the term, and I think it's very easy. Especially here in America where things are, maybe we live a pretty easy life comparatively, if we're comparing our Christian journeys to, say Christians in North Korea or parts of Africa, even Mexico, parts of Mexico. I was looking in, I think it's the Voice of the Martyrs periodical, where even Mexico or Mexican Christians receive a fair amount of persecution. And without, there's this, and I've got to get back to science. I love science, Jonathan.
Yeah.
I'll make this a lot more concise than the first little science thing I shared. But there's this thing called hormesis, where you introduce a little bit of toxin to an organism, and a little bit of toxin upregulates cellular repair mechanisms that actually makes the organism stronger. And in a way, I think persecution can act a little bit like hormesis, and can really challenge that Christian to be stronger, to take their faith more seriously. And here in America, we have some, and it make it a little tougher. But we don't have it as badly as a lot of Christians across the country, across the world. And so I think it's easy to become complacent, where maybe we let things slip in, maybe music choices or movie choices or attitudes, or things that just you're not going to find anywhere in the pages of Scripture. It's not something that you'd see Jesus embodying. And so I agree. I think it is easy to become complacent.
So one of the interesting things in this passage, if you look over, so this happens, he tells them, I need you to be prepared. I need you to be on the lookout. Don't fall asleep. Keep the lights burning. If you look over at chapter 26, so turn over to Matthew 26, one of the biggest coincidences happens. Matthew chapter 26. Jesus in verse, let me look. Oh, I can't find it. Anyways, we're going to start in verse 40. Look at what he says. Chapter 26, verse 40. Jesus, he's in the Garden of Gethsemane. He knows he's about to die. They all know something's not right here. And this is what he says. Jesus told the disciples to be awake and wait on me. He says, don't fall asleep. I'm going to go in the garden and pray. I want you to be waiting for me as I'm praying. This is what he says. Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, what? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. And this is what I think is cool. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. So a chapter before, he says, don't fall asleep. A chapter later, the apostle. So listen, I mess up a lot. I am certainly not an apostle. They're probably a little closer than I am. Peter, James, and John, the son of Zebedee, and then Peter. They fall asleep after they've been given clear order. And I think it's to teach us probably, hey, look, if even Peter got caught sleeping on the job, sometimes as a Christian, you're going to mess up being prepared too. And that passage, the flesh is willing, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. That applies to a whole lot more than sleep. Jesus is obviously giving a wink to me and you, and he's saying, hey, there are going to be times in your life where you are willing, but your flesh is weak and you're going to mess up. You're going to get caught sleeping on the job. So, yeah, I think we do get caught not waiting for Jesus to come back all the time. We're not prepared, and we mess up in that. So, yeah.
Yes. There's a verse that I think is really insightful. It's where it's the little discourse between the bridesmaids where, the 5 unwise ones said, hey, give us some oil. And, some people might actually know the famous author Ralph Waldo Emerson criticized the wise bridesmaids, for not sharing. That's kind of worldly wisdom, you should have shared, you had oil. Why didn't you share it? But I think we need to not miss the point that Jesus, with his heavenly wisdom, was trying to teach about preparedness. He wasn't highlighting the possibility of last minute preparation. That wasn't what that little tiny discourse was between those bridesmaids. It wasn't about the possibility of last minute preparation. It was about, you look at, the wise bridesmaids' instruction to go to the market. Well, what time was it? It was close to midnight. Who's going to be open at midnight? So they didn't have 24/7 Kmart's and Walmart's and Kroger's. And, Jesus here was highlighting the impossibility of last minute preparedness.
So I want to show everybody real quick on a screen share what these lamps look like in the ancient world. And hang on real quick. There we go. All right. Ben, can you see this?
Yep, there you go.
Awesome.
So, ancient
Israelite lamp. I Googled this, so it's got to be accurate. Just kidding. We had a museum at Harding, and I saw these in there. They have them. It looks like an upside-down seashell almost. And all that it is they've taken clay and they've built it back, and the wick would hang out one end, and it would leach down into this tub that had oil in it. What they used to burn was olive oil. It would only burn for 10 minutes max. So these women came not prepared to wait around a long time. Like that wasn't their game plan. Their game plan was for Jesus or for the groom to show up quickly, and he didn't. And I think a lot of times for people, they don't count the cost. And Jesus talks about this earlier in the book of Matthew. He says a builder needs to count the cost before he starts that building. And I think a lot of times in faith, we don't count the cost before we start. And then Jesus we realize all that Jesus is demanding of us. And it's
Hey,
like,
Jonathan, I think I'm losing you.
uh-oh.
Yeah, the connection's a little
All right.
garbly here.
I think we're better now. Are we good?
Yes, sounds a lot better. Yep, go for it.
We will stop the screen sharing thing. But once we realize we're in it for the long haul, it's hard to keep the faith for the long haul. At the beginning of the faith, everybody is on fire. They've got their 10 minutes of oil and they're ready to burn, buddy. And then they figure out Jesus is coming a little bit later. Peter says that Christ is, no, it's Hebrews. Hebrews writer says Christ is not slow in keeping his promises, as some people think, but he's actually doing it for your benefit, right? He wants everybody to come to repentance. And because of that, has not returned. And it's like we're waiting and living a life of faith for 80 years, 90 years. It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing. He wants us to count the cost and not be found sleeping at any time. Like in your life, could you say, I hope Jesus comes back right now because I'm ready and I'm willing. And, you just got married.
You think of the parable of the sower, with the seed falling on the wayside, with amongst the brambles or among the rocks. It was, we need to, how's your heart? How's your heart? Are you one of those seeds that's going to, that's going to last? That's going to produce 30-fold, 50-fold, 100-fold, and it makes me think of, that theme of endurance. We see multiple times in the New Testament, he who endures to the end shall be saved. I mean, there's that component of endurance, and we see that in multiple passages, in multiple books, all through the New Testament, the idea of endurance.
So there's an application for Christians in that this is a faith that's going to be around for a while, probably. You need to not start this thing for the short haul, but continue in perseverance. But also for the non-believer, I do think, while God doesn't want these hard things to happen in our lives, and he can use a broken thing for our benefit. Joseph talks about it at the end of the book of Genesis. Like, what you meant for bad, God can use for good. And in this situation, I think there are a lot of people, non-believers, that are listening to the gospel maybe for the first time. They've never listened to it before. It is not too late to decide, look, I need to prepare. And I need to make the decision to follow Christ. And I've been putting it off for a while, but I need to do it. And it makes me wonder what stops them from just making that next step. In the same way that these virgins couldn't get oil from other virgins, we can't get our faith from family members or our parents or our spouse. It has to be our faith. And we need to take the step, if we haven't committed to Christ, to do that, right? So is there anything you'd like to add?
Absolutely. I just think there is really a surprise element surrounding a lot of Jesus' life events. Most people didn't see his coming. Jesus tried to tell his disciples about his death, and they didn't see it. And who could have predicted his ascension? There's so much surprise around, or lack of predictability around a lot of Jesus' life events. And we can kind of look back on that and learn from it, so that we will be prepared. So that his second coming, or when our time is up, it won't catch us by surprise. We will be prepared.
That's absolutely right. Well, Ben, thank you. We need to go ahead and wrap up. I'm gonna wrap up. Would you say a prayer for us as we close, and then we'll be finished?
All right. Our dear Father God, we're so thankful for this time we've had to delve into your words and to just be reminded of how much you love us and how you put provisions in place for us. And Father, how you want us to be prepared. Help us to live lives with, exemplifying your character, just as Jesus would have, so that you can come back whenever and we will be 100% prepared to meet you. Father, thank you so much for Jesus and all that he's done for us. In his name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Awesome. Thank you, Ben.
Hey, thanks, Jonathan.